You've done this before. January 1st. New gym membership. New journal. New plan to finally read more, eat better, wake up earlier, to become the person you keep promising yourself you'll be. And for a few days, it works. You feel it. The motivation is real. Then life happens. You miss a day. Then two. And within a few weeks, the new version of you quietly disappears, and the old routine creeps back in like nothing ever changed. Almost everyone has lived this cycle. So here's the question worth asking. Why does this happen to nearly all of us, and is there anything that actually breaks the pattern? 2,000 years ago, a group of philosophers thought they had an answer. And surprisingly, modern psychology is now catching up to what they figured out with nothing but observation and discipline of their own. Before we get into it, let's clear something up. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotion or pretending nothing bothers you. That's a common misconception. At its core, Stoicism is closer to a user manual for the mind, a set of observations about how humans actually function, written by people who spent their lives paying close attention to their own behavior. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, weren't abstract theorists locked away in libraries. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor, managing wars and plagues while writing private notes to himself about how to stay disciplined and grounded. Epictetus was born into slavery and later taught some of the most practical ideas about self-control that still hold up today. Seneca advised one of Rome's most volatile rulers while writing essays on everything from anger to the use of time. These weren't people with the luxury of overthinking. They needed ideas that actually worked under pressure. And one of the ideas they kept coming back to was this: discipline isn't a feeling. It's something else entirely, and once you understand what that something else is, the whole cycle of starting and quitting starts to make a lot more sense. Here's the first idea, and it sounds almost backwards at first. Aristotle, who came before the Stoics but heavily influenced them, put it simply: we become what we repeatedly do. Not what we intend to do. Not what we plan to do. What we actually do, over and over, becomes who we are. This matters because most people think of discipline as a kind of cage, something that restricts you, holds you back from what you really want. But the ancient view flips that completely. Aristotle's framing suggests that excellence itself is just a habit, not a personality trait, not something you're born with. A habit, the same as anything else. And here's where it gets interesting. Lao Tzu, writing in a completely different part of the ancient world, arrived at almost the exact same conclusion from a different angle. He said that mastering others might make you powerful, but mastering yourself makes you something stronger entirely. Why does this matter for your gym membership, or your reading goal, or whatever habit you're trying to build? Because both of these thinkers are describing the same mechanism. Identity follows action, not the other way around. You don't wait until you feel like a disciplined person and then start acting like one. The order is reversed. You act, even in small, almost meaningless ways, and the identity follows afterward. This is why motivation so often fails as a starting point. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are unreliable by nature. They show up when they want to and disappear just as easily. If your habit depends on a feeling being present, you've built something fragile from the start. The Stoics weren't waiting to feel like getting up early, or feel like training, or feel like sitting down to write. They treated those actions as separate from how they felt about them. The feeling was irrelevant. The action was the point. This is also where the phrase discipline equals freedom, a more modern phrasing, but deeply Stoic in spirit, actually makes sense. The freedom isn't the absence of structure. It's what structure makes possible. A person with no discipline around their time, health, or attention isn't free. They're at the mercy of whatever feeling shows up first each morning. The disciplined person, paradoxically, has more freedom, because their actions aren't hostage to their mood. So if motivation isn't the answer, what is? This is where the Stoics' obsession with small, repeatable action comes in, and it's also where their ideas line up almost perfectly with what modern behavioral science has found. There's a simple but important distinction here. Motivation gets you started. Something else entirely is what keeps you going. The The Stoics didn't have the vocabulary of habit loops or behavioral triggers, but they understood the underlying truth. Big, emotionally charged starts rarely last, because the emotion that fueled them inevitably fades. What survives is whatever has become automatic, whatever no longer requires a decision. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up and decide whether you're motivated to do it. It's not a choice anymore, it's just what happens. That's the end state every habit is moving toward, whether it's exercise, reading, writing, or anything else. The goal isn't to stay motivated forever. The goal is to make the behavior require no motivation at all. This is also why willpower-based approaches tend to collapse. Willpower is a limited resource. It gets depleted over the course of a day, especially under stress. If your plan depends on having enough willpower left at 9 p. to do the hard thing, you've built a system that's destined to fail on your worst days, which, statistically, are the days you most need the habit to hold. The Stoic alternative isn't more willpower. It's removing the need for willpower in the first place by making the desired behavior the path of least resistance and making the undesired behavior require effort to access. There's an idea often repeated in modern training circles that the successful person isn't the exceptional one, but the average person with relentless, narrow focus. That's not a throwaway motivational line. It's describing exactly this mechanism. You don't need to be special. You need a small set of behaviors, repeated without negotiation, until they no longer feel like behaviors at all, just like things that happen. This reframes the entire failure of January's gym membership. It wasn't a failure of character. It was a system that depended on a renewable supply of motivation, and motivation, by its nature, is not renewable on demand. So what does this actually look like in practice? The Stoics weren't just theorists, they had specific, repeatable practices. 2 are worth highlighting, because they're both things you can start tonight. The first is a practice sometimes called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of difficulties. Each evening, or each morning, Marcus Aurelius would mentally walk through the obstacles the day might bring, not to feel anxious about them, but to remove their power to surprise him. If you've already imagined the moment you won't feel like training, won't feel like writing, won't feel like getting out of bed, that moment loses some of its grip when it actually arrives. You've already met it once, in your mind, and decided in advance what you do. This is strikingly similar to what modern psychologists call implementation intentions, deciding in advance, specifically, what you'll do when a particular obstacle shows up. If I don't feel like going to the gym after work, I will still put on my shoes and walk out the door, even if I only do 5 minutes. The decision is made before the moment of resistance, when your thinking is clearest. The second practice is journaling, and Marcus Aurelius's own private notebook, written purely for himself with no audience in mind, is essentially a record of him talking himself through exactly these struggles. Not polished wisdom for others, reminders to himself, written because even an emperor needed to reconvince himself, every single day, of the same basic truths. If you want to try something concrete this week, here are 2 small starting points drawn directly from this episode. First, tonight, before bed, spend 2 minutes imagining tomorrow's most likely obstacle to whatever habit you're building, and decide, specifically, what you'll do when it shows up. Second, pick one habit and shrink it down to something almost embarrassingly small, small enough that skipping it would feel more effortful than doing it. The goal for the first month isn't progress. It's repetition without exception. The size of the action barely matters. What matters is that it happens, every day, regardless of how you feel. So, to bring this back to where we started, the reason you can't stick to anything probably isn't a flaw in you. It's a flaw in how the plan was built, a plan that quietly required you to feel a certain way before you'd act. The Stoic reframe is simple. Even if it's not easy, discipline isn't a feeling you wait for. It's an action you take regardless of feeling, repeated until it stops requiring a decision at all. If this way of thinking is useful to you, there's a lot more where this came from. Next time, we are going to look at a related idea, what the Stoics had to say about money, possessions, and why some of the wealthiest feeling people in history owned almost nothing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.